Welcome to Hotline TV, everybody. I'm John Mercurio.
And I'm Amy Walter. Will, Republicans are all abuzz these days about repealing the brand new health care law. The president signed this morning. But the new way forward is fuzzy for a number of Senate candidates. John and I are going to track down 4 of those races.
Yes, we are.
Beginning with the Illinois Senate race, Mark Kirk, though he is a moderate Republican, he obviously voted against the health care bill in the House and has signed the Club for Growth pledge to repeal it, yet he hasn't talked much about it.
Hasn't talked much about it at all. He talked about it with a small group, a closed-door group of Republicans last week. This was in the same meeting that he said that Barack Obama, former Illinois Senator Barack Obama, was going to be a one-term senator. Obviously,
one-term president.
One-term president. Thank you. So
he was a one-term senator.
Not even a one-term senater. Obviously, sort of a red meat group of people. He's signing on to what is, I think, at this point, a very red meat repeal effort on his part, and it could be very tricky. I think what it indicates for Republicans and Mark Kirk is an increasing sense of confidence that this is a very winnable race, that the Democratic nominee, Alexei Giannoulias, is going to be having so many problems that unless they're able to replace Giannoulias on the ballot, this is a race that they do need to run to the right. They do need to motivate their base because the middle will be their territory.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally their concern is that the enthusiasm gap wanes between now and the election because there's nothing continuing to stir them up like the debate in the House was, right? So there's not going to be any more Tea Party protests in front of the Capitol while a bill is being voted on.
Sure.
That said, look, the other issue for Kirk is he has to find ways throughout this campaign to keep those things on the back burner while he focuses exclusively on Giannoulias and his problems.
Exactly.
If this debate is about what's better for healthcare, then Mark Kirk has already lost the campaign. If he can't focus this on the fact that and we'll hear this over and over again, Giannoulias, the failed banker.
But it's interesting, I think, that that the way that he decided to deliver this message, to sign on to the Club for Growth plan and to announce it in a sort of closed-door group of Republican activists indicates, as you're saying, I think that he wants the message to get out quietly, to get out to the base in a very sort of effective way without appealing or really
and I think bottom line for most voters, it's going to be, the economy, jobs, and Giannoulias that are going to drive this election. All right.
Moving right along, the Kentucky Senate race. Amy, tell me a little bit about that Kentucky Democratic primary and what they've been saying.
We seem to be dividing now on a lot of different issues.
Okay.
Dan Mongiardo running as the populist, blue-collar, man of the people Democrat versus Jack Conway, who he sort of decries as a country club Duke University basketball fan.
He's one tough
he is. So they're trying to make a dividing line sort of on class populism issues. But Mongiardo coming out against the health care bill, and which also suggests that he may be feeling very comfortable with his positioning in the Democratic primary. The latest polls have him ahead by a pretty significant margin. Normally, as we're seeing in these Democratic primaries, these guys are trying to fight as hard as they can to move left.
To the left.
In this case, not so much.
Not so much, and this is Kentucky, I think, and the only thing that Conway does have, I think, still going in his favor in this race is a significant money advantage at this point over Mongiardo. But you're right, I think Mongiardo positioning himself for a general election that at this point looks extremely tough in a very Republican year, but positioning himself along with, I think Ben Chandler voted against the House bill that they voted on just the other day. So I think this puts him in line, frankly, with Kentucky sort of, I wouldn't say Democratic mainstream, but at least an element and a forceful element in the Democratic
Party.
Party.
For all the talk that of these candidates who are going to get challenges from their left for voting against the bill, you're not really hearing about that in Kentucky.
Not so much. Moving right along, Arizona Senate primary, the Senate Republican primary, John McCain facing a pretty tough, well, it could be, I'm not saying yet, definitely, but it could be a very tough nomination fight against former Congressman J.D. Hayworth. J.D. Hayworth has already signed on to the Club for Growth's repeal effort. Of course, the club having endorsed Hayworth over McCain. McCain also, though, I mean, without actually signing on to the club's repeal effort, this is somebody who
takes their language.
Has taken their language, has said he would repeal the entire bill, has come out strongly against the Senate Democratic leadership for the reconciliation efforts, was the one who came out yesterday, said there's nothing that can get done in the Senate for the rest of the year because of the tactics that Democrats have used over health care. So without actually aligning himself with his opponents in his primary, he's doing everything tactically and rhetorically to get there.
I mean, what's fascinating is just to see how far right McCain has had to tack throughout this primary. This is the latest example of this. The idea that, you know, he's going to somehow be able to establish himself as a maverick again seems like a very difficult thing to do, but this is obviously his last term.
And it's interesting as well. You think it's his last term? I mean, if
he's going to run again in 6 years?
Well, you mean if he wins?
Yeah, if he wins. Yeah.
And it's interesting, too, considering the fact that for the next couple of months, Democrats plan to bring back to the center, one of the biggest issues that put him on the forefront in 06 and 07, immigration reform. So we'll see how that plays out. New Hampshire Senate, Amy Walter.
Well, here's another place where, you know, Republicans had thought that they were going to get an ideal candidate in Kelly Ayotte because she, on paper at least, looks like the kind of candidate that works well in New Hampshire. She doesn't have a voting record. She has worked for a Republican and a Democrat. She's hard to put into that box of, you know, a partisan ideology, and yet she has had to move to the right for fears that she could lose the primary to more conservative Republican Ovid LaMontagne. She now has come out strongly for repeal, as has Ovid. And what's interesting is to match these two up against the Democratic nominee, Paul Hodes, who we sat down with the other day, who is convinced that this is a winner in this election, has no interest in running from it, has no interest in putting it on the back burner. He is going to basically challenge these guys to say, all right, fine, you're going to repeal it. Which part of it do you not like? What do you want to take away, you know, the cap on lifetime limits? Do you want to take away the extension to kids, you know, up till they're age 26, blah, 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 blah.
What's interesting about Hodes' strategy from the meeting that we had with him last week was that what he wants to do, is fight on the substance of the health care law that just took effect, talk about different popular elements of it that he strongly supports and he wants Republicans to go on record opposing. But he's trying to, by attacking Ovid LaMontagne and Kelly Ayotte, make them out to be creatures of Washington, D.C., supporting groups like the Club for Growth or Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader. And by doing that, he then tries to position himself as the outsider, even though, frankly, at this point, he's the only one who serves in Washington.
And who actually voted on it.
And who actually voted on the bill. So it's an interesting technique, an interesting strategy. We'll see how well it works. We're still a few months from even knowing who the Republican nominee will be in that race.
All right, and so finally, for our last words, is this repeal strategy a good idea for Republicans come November?
You know, I say no. I'm going to say no because I think that, first of all, as you've been saying, and as I agree, what we're going to be talking about in November is the economy. That's obviously what people are much more focused on. The repeal strategy certainly works to keep that sort of conservative base of the party motivated for the time being, but I have to imagine that even at that time, you're going to have a much broader constituency focused on the economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's probably not going to matter. It's probably much more important for the folks, especially those who want to run for higher office in 2012, to get on record with conservatives saying, I was against this from the very beginning, so that they don't run into, say, a Mitt Romney problem, where you come out for something that a few years later now has become a lightning rod.
Imagine that,
I can't believe that, and he's going to have to backtrack on that. Yeah, that's
so
weird. It's so unusual for him. But fundamentally, I think that if either side, either candidate in a race spends too much time talking about the particulars of this healthcare reform bill, they risk looking out of touch because they're not addressing the issue that people really care about, which is jobs and the economy. So there we go.
That's a little bit of what we were just thinking today. We're out of time, so...
Until next time, we'll see you on Hotline TV.